She lived in silence for years, until a stranger with a baby asked, "Can we stay one night?" The blizzard howled like a wounded beast, clawing at the shutters and screaming down the chimney. Snow swirled in angry spirals across the clearing, burying the footprints that had led to her porch. Inside, Martha Carver stood rigid in the gloom, both hands wrapped around the stock of her rifle. The iron was cold, but her palms were slick with sweat. The knock came again. Once, pause, then two sharp raps like a code. She said nothing, moved no closer to the door. The wind moaned through the cracks in the frame. Then a voice hoarse, frayed, nearly swallowed by the storm. "Please, the boy is cold. Can we stay just one night?" Her breath hitched. She turned to the peephole, rubbed the frost from its rim, and leaned in. A man stood out there, coat-soaked and half-frozen, his arms curled protectively around a child. The boy's head sagged against his chest, unmoving. White vapor puffed weakly from the child's lips, each breath fainter than the last. Martha had lived alone for 7 winters. The first one nearly killed her. The second taught her how to survive. By the third, the mountains had carved her into something harder than she ever meant to be. She came to the Wind River Range after the fire, the one that took the stagecoach, her husband, and her daughter, all in one searing instant. The fire had left nothing but charred iron and blackened bone. Martha buried what the undertaker gave her, sold the rest, and disappeared into Wyoming territory with a pack mule and a hollowed-out heart. The mail station she found was long abandoned, just 2 stone walls, a rusted stove, and a caved-in roof. But it was high, far from town, and untouched by anyone who might remember her name. That was all she needed. She rebuilt it stone by stone, patched the roof with timber, shoveled out the old ash, and taught herself to live off milk, snowmelt, and silence. A few goats, a mutt she called Jasper, and the axe her husband once used to chop wood for her when she was pregnant. Years passed. She stopped waiting for the pain to go away. Instead, she learned to live with it, like a bullet too deep to dig out. Once or twice a year, a hunter might pass through or a trapper with pelts to trade. But most folks thought the place was haunted or cursed. Good. She left their stories alone, and they returned the favor. Sometimes in spring, she'd find flowers blooming near the grave she'd built behind the cabin. The cross had no name, just a curl of iron she'd twisted into a heart. She never spoke aloud, only to Jasper. Her voice, once warm and full of song, had grown brittle from disuse. In town, they still told stories about Martha Carver, the one who lost her mind after the fire, the widow who vanished into the snow. They didn't know she was still watching the world, alone behind her rifle, listening to the wind like it might one day bring her peace. Martha opened the door. The cold hit her face like a slap. Snow gusted past her boots as she stepped forward with the rifle at her side. The man stood hunched in the wind, clutching the boy tighter as the door creaked open. He made no sudden moves, just looked at her with sunken eyes and lips too blue to form full sentences. "I ain't armed," he rasped. Just need a place for him to breathe." The boy in his arms looked no more than 5 or 6. His face was waxen, his lashes crusted with ice. Martha didn't lower the rifle, but she didn't shut the door, either. She studied them both. The man's coat was torn at the shoulder, his hands calloused and bleeding from cold. One boot had lost its heel. He hadn't come far, couldn't have, not in this weather. "Inside," she said, stepping back. He blinked like he hadn't heard her, then nodded and stumbled through the doorway. The boy whimpered once as they passed into the warmth. Jasper barked but didn't charge. He sniffed, then settled by the stove as Martha closed the door and bolted it behind them. "Sit," she said. The man sank into the rocking chair like a sack of stones. Martha dragged the stool closer to the fire and laid the boy across it. Carefully, her fingers sure despite how long it had been since she'd touched another person. "His name's Johnny," the man said quietly. "You his father?" He shook his head, slowly. "No, not by blood, but I'm all he's got." Martha placed the back of her hand against the boy's forehead. "Hot, too hot." She brought out a rag, soaked it in snowmelt, and wiped his face. Then she poured warm milk into a tin cup and dribbled it gently between his lips. He swallowed once, twice, but didn't wake. What happened to him? There was a wagon, heading south. I came across it near the river, broken, half-burned. Everyone inside, they didn't make it. I found him crawling out the back, crying for someone who wasn't there. And you just took him? The man didn't answer right away. He watched the flames dance in the stove like he saw ghosts inside them. They were dead, he said. All of them. I couldn't leave him. Martha didn't ask more. She didn't need to. She'd seen what fire did to a child's face, smelled what burned flesh left behind. A silence settled between them, deep and complete. After a while, she brought out a wool blanket and wrapped it around his shoulders. He didn't look up, just whispered, "Thank you," like it hurt to say it. That night, she didn't sleep. She watched them both, the man slumped in the chair, the boy's chest rising and falling in shallow waves. In the middle of the night, the boy cried out once. A wordless sound, no words behind it. Martha was beside him before she thought to be. She pressed a hand to his cheek, wiped the sweat from his brow. He didn't wake, but his breathing eased. At dawn, she ladled stew into 3 bowls. The man stirred, startled by the smell. "What do I call you?" he asked. "Martha." He gave a slow nod. "Clint." Neither spoke for a while, just ate, slowly, letting the warmth in their stomachs fight back against the cold that lived in their bones. Later that day, Clint tried to help with chores. He limped, favoring one knee, but still chopped wood like a man used to hard labor. Martha didn't ask about the injury, just handed him the axe and watched. It was the 3rd day when trouble came. She was hanging clothes behind the cabin when she spotted him, a rider at the edge of the trees. He wore a buffalo hide coat and carried a rifle across his back. A long scar ran from his eye to his collar, cutting through skin that hadn't smiled in years. He dismounted and walked straight toward her. "You Carver?" he asked. "I am. I'm looking for a man, traveling with a child. Might have passed through this way." Martha didn't flinch. "What's he to you?" "He's wanted. Took a widow's son from her wagon and ran. Name's Clint. Heard he was seen near the mountain pass." Martha felt her blood run cold, but her voice stayed steady. "No one's come through here." The man stared at her for a long time. Then he looked toward the cabin, his eyes narrowing. "You mind if I take a look inside?" "I do." He raised an eyebrow. "I'm just doing my job, ma'am. And I'm protecting my home." They stood there in the wind, neither moving. Jasper growled low beside her. Finally, the man tilted his head. "You sure you want to lie for him?" Martha didn't look away. "I'm sure he didn't steal anything from me." The man stared another moment, then spat in the snow. "If you see him, tell him he can't run forever." He mounted and rode off without another word. Martha stood there long after he vanished. The wind picked up again, colder now, sharper. Inside, Clint stood just behind the curtain, white-faced. "You heard." She nodded. "Why'd you lie?" Martha didn't answer. She walked past him, opened the cabinet, and pulled down another blanket. That night, she placed it over him again without a word. On the morning of the 4th day, the boy stirred. It was subtle, a flicker beneath the eyelids, a twitch of the fingers. But Martha saw it. She knelt beside him and placed her hand gently on his cheek. "Johnny," she whispered. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused, watery. He blinked against the firelight. Clint was beside them in an instant, breath caught in his throat. "Hey, little man," he said softly. "You made it." Johnny didn't speak, but his gaze drifted between the two of them, and when Martha offered a spoonful of broth, he drank. The fever had broken. For the first time since they'd arrived, something like calm settled in the cabin. Clint sat by the hearth, rubbing his hands together like a man thawing after a long winter inside his soul. Johnny slept again, but this time it was peaceful. By afternoon, the storm passed. The wind dulled to a whisper. Martha opened the door to a white world, snow piled high, the trees bowing under the weight of it. The tracks from the scar-faced man's horse were already disappearing into drifts. She found Clint splitting logs behind the shed, shoulders hunched, breath visible in the cold air. He looked up as she approached. "You should leave," she said. Clint set the axe down. "I will, soon as he's strong enough to ride." I meant now. He nodded slowly. I figured. I lied to that man. Put a target on my back. Don't know why I did it. Clint looked away. I do. That night, she made more stew. Johnny woke and sat up, weak but alert. He ate half a bowl and smiled, just a little. It nearly broke her. After supper, she found herself staring at the fireplace, her hand resting absently on the rocking chair's arm. Clint sat across from her, turning something over in his fingers. He used to draw, he said suddenly. Who? Johnny. Before the fire. Had a little tin of pencils. Cheap things. Carried it everywhere. Even held on to it when I pulled him out. Martha said nothing. I was supposed to meet them. I was late. Snow held me back at the crossing. By the time I got there, the wagon was already burning. He didn't cry, just stared at the floor like the ashes were still there. You don't have to explain, she said. I do. His voice was low, steady. Because I don't want you thinking I'm something I'm not. I'm no hero. I don't even know what I am anymore. Martha didn't answer. But later, when he fell asleep in the rocker, she fetched her daughter's old quilt, the one with the frayed edge and the pinecone pattern, and laid it over him. The next morning brought tracks again. A different rider this time, broader, slower. He came up the slope from the south and dismounted like he'd done it 1,000 times. His coat bore a badge half buried in snow. He knocked with the side of his fist. Martha opened the door just wide enough to see his face. Ma'am, he said, tipping his hat. Name's Sheriff Kinsey. I'm looking for a man, name of Clint Weaver, traveling with a child. She didn't blink. Why? Because there's a widow in Laramie claims he took her son. He saved him from a fire, Martha said evenly. Maybe. Or maybe he's running. He shifted his weight, glanced past her shoulder. Smoke's been rising from this chimney all week. Lot of folks think you're dead. I'm not. You hiding someone, Miss Carver? I'm sheltering a boy who would have frozen to death. The sheriff's jaw worked silently. Just then, Johnny appeared behind her, blanket around his shoulders, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Mama, he said, blinking. The word hit like thunder. Martha didn't turn, didn't look back. Her eyes never left the sheriff. Clint stood farther in the room, silent, hands raised. Kinsey took it all in, the child's voice, the fire, the man with open palms. He seemed to age in that moment, years dropping on his shoulders like snowfall. You planning to lie to me, ma'am? No, she said calmly. Just telling you the truth as I see it. The law isn't just ink. Sometimes, it's what you do when no one's looking. The sheriff said nothing. He looked from the boy to the man, then to Martha. After a long pause, he stepped back. Well, he muttered, adjusting his coat. My horse don't like wind much. I'll keep riding north. Nothing to see here. He turned and walked down the slope without another word. Martha closed the door behind him and bolted it. Then she leaned against it for a long, long time, her heart pounding like hooves across frozen ground. They didn't speak of what had passed. Not that night, not the next morning, but something had shifted, a line crossed, or maybe erased entirely. Martha moved more softly through the cabin now. She noticed the way Johnny clung to Clint's leg, the way Clint's eyes followed the boy like he was afraid to blink and miss a moment. They were trying to live, and Martha, without quite meaning to, had started helping them do it. She boiled broth with extra root vegetables, taught Johnny how to gather eggs from beneath the hens without getting pecked. Clint chopped wood until his palms blistered and bled, then kept going. Martha said nothing, but left a jar of salve by the basin that night. For a time, the snow seemed to protect them. The world fell silent under its weight, a hush that felt almost holy. But peace on the frontier is a fragile thing, never built to last. 1 week after the sheriff rode away, they heard riders. It was early, sky still pale and wet with mist, when Jasper growled at the door. Martha stepped out with her rifle just as 2 figures appeared at the edge of the tree line. One on horseback, the other driving a wagon. The lead man wore a gray coat and a cavalry pistol on his hip. He tipped his hat politely. Miss Carver, he called. Name's Captain Thorne, of the Territorial Guard. Mind if I step down? Martha didn't lower the rifle. I do. He smiled. I'll be quick, then. We've been tracking a fugitive who abducted a child from a widow near Cheyenne. Rumor has it he was seen heading into these mountains. Wagon broke down, they say. Took shelter with a reclusive woman near Wind River. She didn't answer. The captain dismounted. He was careful with his movements. Slow, practiced. A man used to commanding, not forcing. Look, ma'am, I don't want trouble, but the governor's office is watching this case. The boy's mother is grieving, and the public wants answers. I'm not the public. Then perhaps you'll be honest instead. Are you sheltering Clint Weaver and a young boy named Jonathan Gray? No, she said. I'm protecting a child who would have frozen to death, and a man who carried him through a blizzard to my door. The words came out steady, strong. Thorne's smile thinned. That's a generous interpretation of events. It's the right one. From the cabin behind her came the faint creak of floorboards. Johnny moving about. Clint stood near the back window, out of sight but tense. Ready. Thorne stepped forward. Miss Carver, you understand that harboring a fugitive places you under direct violation of territorial law. I understand that letting a child die would make me less human than the wolves scratching at my door. The captain looked past her, toward the chimney, the smoke curling soft against the winter sky. His jaw worked silently. Then he gestured to the soldier in the wagon. Show her. The man stepped down and pulled back the tarp. Inside the wagon was a woman, tall, thin, gaunt with grief. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her dress finer than most who ventured this far west. She stepped forward, hands trembling. Johnny? She called. Baby, it's Mama. Are you in there? Martha's grip tightened on the rifle. Behind her, the door opened. Mama. Johnny's voice, uncertain, high with confusion. Clint appeared behind him, catching the boy gently, holding him back. The woman gasped. It's him. That's my son. That's my Jonathan. She stumbled forward, but the captain raised a hand. Hold. Let's do this proper. Martha turned to Clint. His face was pale. Johnny clutched his hand, staring past Martha toward the wagon. You told me she was gone. Clint dropped to one knee, his voice shaking. I thought she was Johnny. I swear. I found you alone. Everyone else was... There was fire. I didn't know she lived. The boy blinked rapidly, torn between joy and fear. Is she really? Clint looked at Martha. Then he stood, stepped forward, and raised his hands. I never meant to take him. I thought he had no one. The captain nodded toward his men. Take him. The soldiers moved, but slowly, cautiously. Martha stepped in front of Clint, rifle raised. You'll take him over me. Thorne frowned. Ma'am. He saved that boy. If he's guilty of anything, it's trying to do what the rest of you wouldn't. If you arrest him now, you're telling that child that saving someone is a crime. Thorne studied her a long moment. This isn't about guilt. It's about law. Martha's voice dropped to a whisper. Then your law is hollow. A pause. Then the woman from the wagon stepped forward, tears streaming. No. She's right. This man, he saved my son. He did, Martha said. Carried him through snow. Slept on the floor so the boy could have the warmest spot. Fed him. Sang to him when he cried. The woman's eyes broke. She covered her mouth with both hands. I thought I'd lost him, she whispered. I prayed, and someone answered. Thorne sighed and removed his gloves. I'm not a judge, but I can choose not to arrest a man when no charges have been filed. He turned to Clint. You'll come to Laramie. Give your account. Let the boy speak for you. Clint nodded. I will. No chains, Martha said. Thorne hesitated, then nodded. No chains. Johnny rushed to Clint, wrapping his arms around his waist. Don't go, he cried. Clint knelt, pulled him close. I have to, buddy, but I'll come back. I promise. The boy sobbed, clinging tight. The mother moved closer, but stopped a few steps short, uncertain. I don't want to take him from you, she said, but he's my son. Clint stood, handed the boy gently to her. Then take him home. He deserves that. Martha turned away, unable to watch, But as Clint passed by, he touched her shoulder. "Thank you," he said, "for everything." She didn't answer, only nodded, and stood very still as the snow began to fall again, soft and endless and quiet as breath. The cabin felt emptier without them. Jasper paced the floor that night, sniffing at the corners where Johnny had left his boots. Martha sat by the hearth, staring into the flame like it held answers to questions she hadn't yet asked aloud. She didn't cry, but the silence had changed. By the third day, Clint returned. Alone. Martha opened the door and found him standing in the snow, hat in hand, his coat dusted white. He looked tired, like a man who'd spent years walking a road that never quite ended. "They cleared me," he said. "No charges. And the boy, he's with her. She's good to him. She's different than I remembered." He stepped inside without being asked, took the chair near the fire. "I told them everything," he said. "The truth. About the fire. About finding him alone. About lying to Johnny. You said he called you uncle." Clint nodded. "I let him. Never corrected him. Maybe because I needed someone to believe I was worth something." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small bundle, Johnny's drawing tin. "He left this behind. Said I should keep it. Said I was his safe man." Clint looked up, eyes glassy. "I never was anyone's safe anything." Martha stood slowly, walked to the far wall where 2 pegs held her coat and Clint's borrowed one. After a breath, she reached for the hammer and nailed in a 3rd hook beside them. No words were exchanged. But when Clint looked at that 3rd hook, something in his posture eased. It was permission. Not to stay forever. Not to forget. But to belong. Just enough to matter. By spring, the wind had softened. It no longer cried through the pines but whispered, like a memory that had lost its sharpest edges. The cabin had changed. Johnny now sat at the table most mornings, sleeves rolled, flour on his cheeks, learning to press dough flat with both palms. Martha showed him how to knead with care, how to listen to the dough's silence before it was ready to bake. He always listened. Clint chopped wood behind the house, shirt damp with sweat, his limp less pronounced now. Jasper followed him around like a second shadow, no longer growling when he approached the porch. There were chores to do always, goats to feed, traps to check, firewood to stack. But none of it felt like survival anymore. It felt like life. One morning, Johnny brought home a stone shaped like a heart. Said he found it near the old grave. "I think she left it for me," he told Martha, serious as scripture. Martha didn't speak. She took the stone from his hand and placed it beside the wooden cross. Now mended, its iron heart still hanging. Clint never asked to stay, and Martha never asked him to go. Some days, he rode into town and came back with flour or coffee. Other days, he simply watched the sun rise and said nothing. But on the porch, 3 pairs of boots now waited in a row. One large, one small, and hers worn and dusty. The wind came through the trees, gentle and low. Inside the cabin, the fire crackled. Bread rose on the hearth. The dog snored, and Martha, once buried in silence, stood at her window, hand resting lightly on the frame. For the first time in 7 years, she didn't fear the quiet. She welcomed it.